some of the things that I've pre-done prior to building it up to save a bit of time on assembly. I'm carrying a bit of Loctite, some grease and some pump oil to help lubricate things as we put them together. Have some rags with you as well to keep everything clean, keep your hands clean, and that'll help with the assembly process. Basically, as you're acting as your own inspection, you just need to be checking over the bits and pieces as you're working with them, and particularly with the crankcase, just check for any flashing on the casting that might come loose, checking that there's not too much porosity in any dangerous places, that the threads look okay, and then you'll be ready to assemble. Okay, I'll wait for play. Okay, so I've just explained to you about just checking the crankcase over, checking the threads and all the bore holes, making sure there's no obvious porosity or bits of flashing from the casting hanging around. I took a few steps before we brought all the bits here just to get everything ready. One of the most important things I've done is to size the keys correctly for both the eccentric and the coupling that's going to be fitted later. So you might have to file the keys in order to get them to fit by hand, and what you need to do is to check that against the eccentric. So you need to just try the eccentric on the shaft, make sure that will go on its own, like so. It's nice and easy, and then put the key in and do it again, and just have a nice slip fit, and this will help particularly on disassembly. The other thing we do with the keys is just to grind a 45-degree chamfer on there, so that if it does get a bit tight, you can just drive something in there to flick the keys out. So that's one step that we've done. The other obviously is we've gone and drilled all the bleed holes in the correct position on the barrels. One of the most important stages to take with that is to make sure the inside of that hole is deburred, otherwise you can damage the diaphragm. So the usual method of doing that is just to use a round file and go up the inside and just deburr the edge. And obviously just make sure the rest of it is clean, that the piston slips in and out nice and comfortably. So we've done all those 8 barrels ready for assembly. Right, we've checked through the crankcases and we've looked over all the sharp edges and things like that, and we think that they're okay. So the first step is to go ahead and put the bearing retainers in. Now, bearing retainers fit from the inside. There's a total of 3, but one of them is the seal carrier, so you'll end up with a smaller diameter for the seal carrier. And obviously when you check the other ones, you'll see that the oil seal floats through, so that we keep for a little while later. And these 2 we now fit from the inside of the pump facing outwards. There you've got the lid, you put that in from the inside, and same with the crankcase, you face that in from the inside. Now, what we do with the bolts, we have 2 different length bolts. We have 8x45s and 8x50s. Now the long bolts go into the lid section, like so.
Those are the 45s, are they?
These are the 8x50s.
8x50s.
And then the 8x45s go into the crankcase. Get the bolt started. That was pretty troublesome. Right. What I'm going to do is, because we haven't got a proper fixture, I'm just going to place it over the top. Now what we need to do with these is to seal them with some Loctite sealer.
And that's to stop the oil.
That's right.
Leaking down.
The oil winding down the threads. So we get those in. Just tend to put the Loctite towards the top, because there's no point in winding it all the way. It will wind its way into the thread as you get near the top. One thing obviously as you're doing that is just to make sure the bearing retainer has sat down in the hole correctly. It's nice and level and flat. Pick up, you had some metric sockets.
I've got some.
Where are they? At home?
Yeah.
Didn't get all of that. Right, have we got a ring spanner there, Clay? A half-inch ring spanner. Right, so we've screwed the retainers in, as I said before, using the short bolts on the back being the crankcase and using the long bolts on the lid. Now we're going to fit the bearings. Now there's two different sorts of bearings. We've got one called location bearing, which when you separate it, it's got a shouldered inner race. Now that is placed in the crankcase half, which is this piece, with the shoulder facing to the rear. And then the washer is placed in there before you put the counterbalances in. Then we have the floating bearing, which has just got a simple parallel inner sleeve, and that's the one that's placed in the lid. Okay, so the bearing is being pressed in, and remember that the shoulder of the location bearing is on the bottom end of the pump. What we'll do next is to fit the bearings, the oil seal, which we pressed in under the press, and just put a flat plate to press the seal down flat. It should be quite an easy press fit. Before we do that, we had to fit an O-ring into the top of the cavity above the bearing, and what we'll do is just grease that to hold it. In goes the O-ring. These are quite tricky to hold down sometimes. They'll try and ride up. And then you can fit the oil seal down over the studs. Fit the 3 lock nuts. Of course, remembering to make sure the inner sleeve of the bearing is in place. So again with these, just knit them down firmly. Just going to check the gap, just firmly, evenly. That's it. Okay. Next stage is to fit the 6 bell housing mounting 10x45 volts. As with the mounting studs, we would just put a bit of Loctite, use red sealer Loctite, or one of the more aggressive thread holding ones, because the pump's going to hang on this. So again, we'll just take this down. Where's our partner in crime, Nancy? He's over there.
Water? Yeah. Oh. No, I'll finish it.
Okay, so I'll just tighten them. And what I'll do is just get a member of the audience. Clay, would you like to hold the crankcase for one, please? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
This is the pump stand we're going to build it on now.
Yep. So we insert the shaft. Hang on. Sorry, yeah. Okay. I just usually run a bit of grease around the lip of the seal. that. Yep. It's okay. Right. Most important thing. Don't forget the thrust washer for the bearing.
Get that washer, Clay, when you tighten the top nut down.
That just takes the load, does it?
Yeah, that's it.